Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 852. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we do on race weekends.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do, and we're going to do that tonight, like we always do. But before doing that, I have to introduce my guest, and you know what that means.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, how you doing?
Well, I'm all right.
You're a little mad at the balance of the balance of power, though. I can tell you that.
I'm a little angry at the cards they dealt us this weekend. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
Yes. I'm nearly tired of being angry about it, but yeah, let's just say that the IMSA. Yeah, let's just say I'm angry. And we didn't stand a chance of doing anything.
Yes.
It was like being in a race where everyone had DRS and we were never allowed to use it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. At some point, do you feel like there's people that up and down that paddock feel like if you're going to invest the amount of money that Corvette or GM does in sponsorship of the series or Toyota, that's what impacts the balance of power?
Sometimes you wonder, right? Yeah, because we're up against factory teams, as you said.
Yeah.
And we're not a factory team. I know we race Aston Martins, and we're the only Aston Martin out there. But we're a private team racing Aston Martins, as opposed to Lexus or Corvette, who are racing, factory efforts behind them. So I think there may be something to that. But it was
be the $20 million of series sponsorship that General Motors gives them that has something to do with why the Corvettes run well.
I don't think they're trying to. Yeah, it's tough to say. I just think they got it so wrong, and unfortunately we were the ones that reaped the benefits of their mistake, and even if they turn it around for the next race, it's kind of put us out of the championship. So, but you don't have a double world champion finish last on pace.
Yes.
In a car that's perfectly fine. So, and that was winning last race,
Well, you won 2 races on the trot.
2 races, 3 out of 4 actually, technically with the 2 classes. Yeah,
right. 3 out of 4 with the 2 classes, and now you're at the back. Yeah,
right, and last year we were on pole at the same track that we were at the back of this year. So they just took so much power away. It was impossible, and we did everything all weekend long to try and get something out of it, But there's only so much. It's not like we've got this big reserve of grip and downforce that we can just stick on the car at will. We work with what we have, and usually always try and get the max out of it, and that's all you can do.
Yeah.
We move on. Luckily, the F1 race was a fun one. So
oh my gosh, it's the Dutch Grand Prix, the Netherlands Grand Prix at Zandvoort, and I know you're heading this weekend thinking, oh boy, it's the Dutch Grand Prix, but that's not how it actually ended up. It was kind of turned into this, right? It was kind of fun.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah, a little bit. It turns into a strategy nightmare. Look, it's celebrating its 75th anniversary. What's not to like about that? It's a tricky track, Paul. It's hard on tires. It's not a track that offers prolific passing, so you can understand why so much of it ran without DRS, right? With the rain and stuff like that, making life difficult to get around the car ahead of you. But even when DRS came in on the dry running, the DRS is at a track like this is very powerful, and it means that once DRS was activated, it was easy to get stuck in a DRS train. I know you think I was going to say easy to pass, but no, it's not easy to pass at Zandvoort. It's just easy to get in a DRS train, right?
Yeah. But it is. There's lessons to be learned from this track, honestly.
Yeah.
Because yes, there was a lot of passing going on, and obviously DRS did play a big part, but. The nature of this natural terrain track with its camber and its undulations. I mean, if this track was flat, it would be even so hard to pass, no one would pass anybody.
Yeah.
But because of the camber differences on different parts of a corner in itself, not just from corner to corner, allow for different grip levels. And it allows, even if you've got a vehicle with a little in a train behind car with some disturbance from the air and downforce, you can make some differences by choosing some different lines and using some of those cambers to your advantage. So,
right.
I mean, let's face it, we're never going to have Formula One cars without downforce. So we're never going to without a lot of downforce, so to speak. We're never going to get completely away from downwash or, running in dirty air. So, designing tracks with some camber differences in perhaps places that isn't the ideal line can give people a little extra grip, and give them a shot at it. And obviously we saw some differences in surface grip also with the wet weather, with damp, etc., and the drying track and a green track. So that really helped kind of everything display itself in the massive passing and kind of excitement to the race. But all the tracks we design nowadays are all flat. Oh, we made this corner like this track, yes, but it's flat.
I've mentioned this before on the podcast, and if you've been listening a long time, you go, oh, not this story, but it is apropos. I remember I was having a chinwagger chat with Bobby Epstein, who's the head of COTA, right? Mm-hmm. And I was asking, he was asking me some other stuff, so he called me about something else unrelated, and we were talking. This is a couple of years ago, but we were talking about the track, and I was telling him they were doing a great job, and it's a fun track, it's a good track, and he says, well, what do you think about this track or that element of it? And we were talking a little bit about it, and I asked him, with that turn. Where they kind of tried to mirror the Diabolica Turkey,
right.
Turn 8.
The long right.
Yeah,
triple right.
Yeah. And I was asking him about that and kind of the infield section and stuff. And I remember asking him if he would make any changes, what he'd do. And he goes, honestly, I'd like to. If I was going to do it all over again, I would have banked that turn, in a decent bank, which would have been, to your point, Paul, kind of interesting, because the reason it never really functioned like Diabolica or Turn 8 at Turkey is because they were not coming into that turn as fast as Turkey does. Right. And so their speeds are already reduced because of the turns before it. So it just kind of does little. But if you banked it, you could alter some of those lines. And to your point, getting that, the exit benefit coming off that banking could be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's, as I said, lessons to be learned. It's an old track, and the old tracks have their own nuances because they're just kind of laid out there in what they have nowadays. They put them in places that's a flat plane. So, and I don't know if we're going to find a natural terrain track laid nowadays. It's probably more expensive or it's just not in the right place. But
I know where one is, right here in the Ozarks with me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Unfortunately, that turned out to be a bit dangerous. So
it's a little too natural, I guess.
Yeah, I think they wrote a few cars off in the first week, and it made series that were going to go. They decided, maybe not. Maybe we'll wait. But which is a shame because I haven't been there, but I did see the track. It looks pretty awesome. But
it does look awesome.
It's a bit too much old Spa than new Spa, maybe. I don't know.
It kind of is. There's a point where you feel like you're going past Stavolo, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Anyway, it was a tricky race in Zandvoort with rain coming down at the start, rain coming at the end, red flag. Let's jump into it and talk about the race. We're going to talk about the teams as they finished. I'm getting beat up all the time, Paul. It's just, hey, you guys are stale. You got to mix it up. You're just, there's so many new podcasts with all this fun and entertaining content. I'm kind of like,
gadgets.
Oh. I was like, what?
Stop yelling at Todd.
I don't know. So I thought we'd just review each team, but we're not going to talk about the teams. We're going to talk about how the tires performed on each car during each stint for each team. Wouldn't that be different?
That sounds exciting.
Yes. All right.
I'll get back to you. I got a thing.
Yeah, right. I got a thing. About 5 minutes into tire talk, we're like,
Yeah, it's called a nap. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about the teams. We're going to talk about Red Bull up front. Sergio Perez in P4. Max Verstappen takes a win, 9th win on the trot, equaling Sebastian Vettel's win record of 9 in a row. The 11th, I think, for the team. Max, this whole concept of having an easy cruise from pole position is not exactly how this played out. He chose to stay out a lap longer when the rain came. So you had the car's grid up. They're ready to start. As soon as the lights went out, the rain came down on the backside of the track, and so he chose to stay on the lap longer than Perez did, and this allowed Sergio to take the lead. Once Max did box, he quickly erased about 14 seconds of that lead that Perez had, and I believe Sergio said that, well, the reason that he caught up so quickly is because he was conserving the inters, and he wasn't pushing it hard, and I think they said that on the broadcast as well. And that's why Max made up so much time. I'll let you decide on that. But while Sky Sports, though, they seemed positively flummoxed as to why the team would box Max before Sergio for slicks. And I'm sitting here, I mean, they just were going on and on about it. I was like, isn't it obvious why they would do? The guy's leading the championship. You've got a shot at a perfect season here, and you're flummoxed as to why they would give Max the preferred undercut call. Hello?
Newsflash, Max is number one.
Max is number one.
And with that comes a couple of bonuses. Strategy being one of them, right?
Yeah, I was thinking the whole time, it's obvious, is it not? I don't know.
Yeah.
Max took the lead, didn't look back from then, even when he had some pressure from Alonso there in the last 5 laps. Took the win, P1, his third win at the Dutch Grand Prix. So a great weekend for Max. Just, him in that car, Paul, they're sublime. They're working so well together, and it's, yes, a good portion is how good that car is, but as evidenced by Sergio, it's not all the car, all right? And
yes.
And Max is performing at the zenith of his racecraft and career. There's a lot of people that are tired of hearing about it, tired of seeing it. They're not Max fans or Red Bull fans, but boy, it's like all those years Lewis and his perfection with Mercedes was just so impressive. You have to respect it.
You have to respect it. I mean, it's happened many times over Clark at Lotus, Schumacher at Ferrari. It's been going, and it is a beautiful thing to watch, and it's because the level that all the other drivers he's racing against are at, and to think that he's actually head and shoulders above that right now is mightily impressive. The team obviously have to support it with the car, but going back to that number one, number two thing. I mean, it was one first. I remember even knowing about this kind of thing was back in the 70s when Ronnie Peterson became Mario Andretti's teammate. And I remember being supremely frustrated the whole time because they'd gone into it and Ronnie had agreed to it that Mario was the number one driver. And so Ronnie was there to support Mario. And sometimes that meant Ronnie wasn't going to win the race, even though he had a bit of pace, and it was frustrating. But it's really how an effective and successful team operates. Yeah. And the last thing they want is to have a battle on track between Sergio, or give Sergio the option of battling Max. They want to kind of keep them separated, honestly, because Sergio's can be a bit of a loose cannon. So I think, to keep everyone calm, let's just keep them separated on track. And Sergio, unfortunately, has to accept the fact he is number two now. And once Max, I don't know. I mean, the team want Max to have ultimate success. They'll keep pushing for Max to win every race, and if he can't win every race, then they'll hand the reins over to Sergio. But right now, that is not going to change, and don't be surprised if it doesn't.
No, it won't change. And you're right; they want to keep a little separated. I mean, you recall, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, right? That got pretty punchy, between the two of them, and the team doesn't want to have to navigate that kind of thing that Toto and Mercedes had to navigate. So that's always difficult. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's talk about Sergio. Sergio's difficult qualifying was pretty much erased with a brilliant call right at the start, Paul. Red Bull executed perfectly. They boxed him on lap 1 for those inters, put him out. He was just plowing through the field. And pretty much lap came all the way back and took the lead. I mean, it was just a brilliant call by Sergio and the team. He may have been nursing those inters, like he said, but where everything really went pear-shaped for Sergio is really the spin that he had. And then the team called him in right as the red flag fell, right before. And he came in, put on the wets, and then the red flag came, and And that was really the difficulty for him. From
Hmm.
a brilliant call in lap one to an unfortunate spin. He had a speeding penalty while trying to get the inners on, and then the strategy call late to bring him in under, ultimately, which was the red flag, kind of bookended his race. His speeding penalty lost him the podium ultimately, but um, you could see him. I guess on the speeding penalty, it was wet. You could see when he came into the pits, he lost traction, just locked
Yeah.
up trying to brake, lost traction. And he even clipped the wall on the entry of the
Did
pit
he?
stop.
Okay.
Yeah. On the front right, he clipped it. And I would imagine if you're Sturgio or the team, you could make the case, look, yes, did I speed? Yeah, because I slid in over the line because it locked up and hit the wall. But I think the stewards might suggest that you should have assessed the conditions and been under control of the car regardless. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
so anyway,
Always dictate. Yeah, yeah. I,
yeah,
I actually thought the recovery from the spin was amazing.
yeah. He did a great job.
We saw a lot of people plow off the track, but how to him to get that car to literally do a 180, with that,
Yeah,
else he was just going to nose it in. So the recovery could have been a whole worse a day for
yeah,
Sergio at that point. So yeah, just a couple of errors. Maybe the strategy wasn't close to his perfection, but yeah, and they're the differences. Max
yeah,
just isn't getting into those situations right now. He's
right.
on that level, and Sergio still got good points out of it. It's still positive for Sergio. Obviously, the most positive is him coming in second, and taking wins when the opportunity arises. But um, gradually clawing his way back to reasonable status
Yeah,
as the number two, I'd say.
agreed. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll down in P11, Fernando Alonso in P2. Fernando had a good start, opted for the inners at the end of the second lap, which in his estimation may have been a bit late, but regardless, the move put him in a competitive situation with an upgraded car this weekend that he said responded to everything he asked for and that he really trusted. I think it's an important element here. They did bring upgrades. And that car did seem to respond to that. And if Fernando is saying that basically everything he was asking of the car, when he pushed, it pushed. When he conserved, it conserved and didn't chew the tires up. And he trusted the car and he had a lot of
Yeah.
confidence in that car, which as a driver, Paul, means everything. And so I think that's a good sign for Aston that whatever the upgrades they brought, despite the rain at the beginning of the end, seem, inverted quotas, seem to be effective. That's good. Fernando passed Gasly and was hunting down Perez when Sergio's mistake opened the door for P2. And from that, he took P2, but he even put a little pressure on Max at the restart and said he thought about having a go at Max and diving down the inside, not braking. And he said, I guess maybe wisdom prevailed on that. But yeah, it was a good race for Fernando.
It was a great race for Fernando. I mean, we saw, a lot of his positioning on the car in different conditions really paying off. Experimenting that pass on the inside of 3 at the beginning was, making use of when everyone isn't at their maximum with tire temperature and grip,
Yes.
and the track is green and all that kind of good stuff. So, he's the man that can see all that stuff ahead of him and plans ahead accordingly. But ultimately, him and the car, just had pace in every single condition, didn't it? Really, in the dry, in the changing conditions, and in the wet. Fernando and the Aston were literally the only real good competition for Max, and
Right.
even to keep that close, I think was super impressive and very confidence inspiring for him and the team, for hopefully with these upgrades transfer to other tracks too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it was great. And, it's just what a wily veteran. That's just where all those years of racing get you and how to find the lines and the weaknesses and take advantage. It's just what the veterans do, and they do it really well. For his teammate Lance, he stayed out far too long on the softs at the start. Then he switched to mediums mid-race, but never really made up ground. I'm not sure if the car didn't respond well to the mediums per se, maybe, or what the issue was. But I could take a guess and suggest that ultimately, once he stayed out too long, then he was on mediums, not softs. And at that point, I'm pretty sure he got hung up in a DRS train. And that kind of slowed his progress back up to the top 10. He said it was a shame because, like Alonso, he said that the car was actually really good pace, had really good pace this weekend. So there again, if you're an Aston Martin fan, you're looking for things to be positive about. Those upgrades may have worked.
They may have worked, but Lance just didn't show it again.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
Yeah, I put that in the WTH section of my race report on the website. There's a couple of elements that are happening on the grid that I'll be very interested if the teams do. Lance is bleeding points for this team, literally bleeding points for this team. It's hurting to that point, If they had another guy that's going to run hard like Alonso and has those chops, Aston Martin would be best of the rest right now,
Yeah. I mean, there's circumstance, and you can always have an excuse and whatever, but Alonso finds a way of finding himself out of those excuses and just finding his way to the front. And ultimately, Lance isn't able to do that right now for whatever reason. I don't know. The thing about Alonso and Lance is obviously knowing his dad owns the team, but Alonso separated himself so far from Lance now. There cannot be any question, which is exactly what Alonso had to do. He couldn't have them be close. I mean, they've been close a couple of times this year, and Alonso's played nice. But ultimately, Alonso's done exactly what he did to get rid of that part of the equation within the team.
That's not even a conversation.
No, Lawrence is like, let all our efforts behind Fernando, he should be, and I'm sure he is, because that is definitely spearheading this team, to a top 3 finish in the championship, which is massive for that team.
It's huge. Given their investment, it's huge. And that's why I'm saying, no offense to Lance, but I think Lawrence would be well to get another seasoned veteran in there with Alonso and make sure you maximize points every weekend at this point as they're developing with their new HQ and their new performance and those kind of things. And they've come out with a very, very interesting rear wing, that seems to be delivering the downforce they want. And, if they're going to be adventurous and come up with some creative concepting around their chassis design that nobody else is doing and everybody may end up copying, then I think, that team deserves to have 2 drivers in it. They're going to maximize points every single weekend, and it's just not happening,
Yeah, no, it's not happening. We don't know if it will happen, but it makes it harder. It makes it harder and easier for those decisions to be made.
Right. Let's talk about Alpine. Pierre Gasly in P3, Esteban Ocon down in P10. Pierre, like Perez, dove into the pits after lap 1, and that was the strategy call that effectively made his race possible. I'm not taking anything away from him. He was driving a masterful race out there, was Pierre. He covered his 5-second penalty he had for speeding and still managed to run in 5th, dispatching the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, if you can believe that. It was just like zip right around a Ferrari. It's like, now, as a Ferrari fan, I was like, what the hell? Did the Alpine just pass? What's happening here?
And Otmar's at home going,
oh my gosh, it was tough. Gasly stayed within striking distance of Perez to make sure that when that 5-second penalty that Perez had was assessed, that he would be in place for P3, and that's exactly how it happened. So a great race for Pierre. Here is a young man and a team that both needed this result, and it was great to see him deliver on it.
Yeah, really. Well, just like Alonso, he was performing in all the conditions.
Yeah,
and he was fighting tooth and nail for every little spot and made some incredible passes as well. No doubt. And I'm sure Ocon's frustrated by seeing that happen, but Gasly earned it by his qualifying. But he fought his way. He kept his way up front and then fought his way to a podium. So. Yeah, I loved watching him drive, and that's why he's excited to be on the podium, but that he didn't leave anything on the table, and that's why you heard him shouting and screaming. It's like, I gave it everything, and here's my reward, right?
Yeah, Yeah, it paid dividends, and it's and when Pierre's hooked up like that, he's a lot of fun to watch. He really is. I really enjoyed his race a lot. His teammate Esteban Ocon, it was interesting for him in that the team fitted those full wets at the very end there before the red flag when the rain came on the last stop. And I'm sitting at home thinking I'd forgot about the whole tire debate over the full wet and it being a useless tire. And I just was then sitting there watching it thinking old school mode, oh my gosh, it's really coming down and putting those full wets. This is going to be a stroke of genius with those full wets on, because he's going to go faster than everybody else. But Esteban said, no. The full wet is never the right call. And if you put those tires on, the race would be to a point of being red flagged, which it was. So he was basically saying the full wet is basically a useless tire because if it gets to the point where you got to have the full wet, they're going to red flag their race at that point.
I'm sure Pirelli appreciate that stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure they appreciated that kind of commentary.
Yeah, but it's been commonplace up and down the pit lane that the wet tire is not, and something needs to be done. They need to have a useful wet tire. The only thing I can imagine is that they thought it would go under a pace car, and everyone, because of the torrential downpour, that everyone would have to change tires to the ultimate wet just to keep themselves from sliding off the track. But the red flag kind of took care of that.
Yeah. Well, it's a dual points finish and a podium, and something, as I mentioned, both Pierre and Alpine needed given the sluggish season they've had so far and the recent culling of the herd over there. So I think it was I think it's a much needed result, and it was great to see Pierre delivered. Yeah.
And even, and if they've got a lesser engine, then these are the conditions where they need to shine, because this is a bigger opportunity for them, right?
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about their engine being, I don't know, don't quote me. I thought they said like 40 horsepower down or something. I can't remember what the number was. It was some metric like that, but it's quite a significant delta. Let's talk about Ferrari.
No, it cannot be, Ricky.
It can't be, Ricky. You had Charles Leclerc at DNF. Carlos Sainz, P5. Charles had contact with Piastri on the first lap that damaged his floor, and from there he slowly sank backwards to the point of retiring the car. Perhaps that could have been avoided had he had a better qualifying session. But to my point, Paul, it's yet another unforced error during qualifying. Yeah. Another crash. I have so far been chalking it up to Charles trying to make something happen in that car.
Yeah, out of the deficit the car is kind of falling into. Yeah.
Right. And I keep saying he's had these unforced errors and these crashes because he's just driving, like a madman trying to get something to happen in that car. But at some point now I'm kind of thinking, but isn't that part of racecraft, knowing the limit of that car? If you can't deliver the performance you're trying to deliver because of the weakness of that car, then surely you shouldn't try it, because it starts to get expensive.
Yeah, it's a tough call because drivers have a concept in their head that they're the best, right? I'm sure Charles is going into it.
No doubt.
Sometimes they think, well, I can do something that can't be done by anyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, but there's always a side to that, going over the limit and crashing too many times, and it seems that's absolutely what Charles is doing. But it's a super, super fine line. I know someone, maybe on the Parc Fermé Facebook page, someone saying, is it time for, Ferrari to move along with the Leclerc experiment? But the thing is, who would you replace him with? He's obviously a very fast driver.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure, and if you can contain that speed with maybe those little decisions that he's making that's getting him in trouble, and taking those away, it'll be a formidable foe for Verstappen and the like when the car is right. And then who are you going to replace him with? It'd be really tough call for them to do it. They've put a lot of weight behind Charles, and there's no real super standout that would be an obvious choice. You'd think Albon or somebody like that, perhaps. Yeah, he's done a formidable job too. But
Lando.
really, if they can get him.
Yeah.
We know the McLaren and their contract situations. Who knows what could happen? But yeah, it's a tough deal.
It is tough.
I'm willing. I'm willing Charles to figure it out, because I think he is a great and exciting driver to watch.
I do too.
And one of the few on the grid that could match Max's pace on any given day in the right car. So I don't want him to, be shoved down the lane down to a lesser team. I want this experiment to work, but for that, Ferrari has to build a car that works also.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be hard on Charles, because I have a lot of deference for him. Like you, I think he's a exceptional talent, and I just would like him to, try to get beyond those unforced errors that we see. That the situation at the team and the car's lack of pace and its weak points and all that is pressure, politics, and frustration enough.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you start adding on crashed cars that Charles is doing, it just makes it even more complicated, I think. Yeah, so tough situation for Charles. Let's talk about Carlos. Carlos was amongst the leaders for much of the race. Gasly, though, just blew by him, as I mentioned. Most likely cost him a podium at that point, given Perez's penalty. But Carlos did a good job of keeping Lewis and Lando behind him, though, even at the restart. He had a lot of pressure. Lewis was looking really fast at that point. And Carlos did a great job of driving defensively, making his car very wide, and held on for a P5 result. So not, I'm sure, where Carlos wanted to be, not where Ferrari wanted to be, but it could have been worse. And I think it was a decent result for Carlos.
Yeah, I think Carlos is doing what ultimately Leclerc would end up doing if he took a bit of his edge off.
Yes.
But I'm not sure Carlos has that extra edge either. I think Charles does. So I think Carlos is showing himself to be a really good driver, but not a great driver.
Right.
And so these races are kind of nearly what Carlos does. He's competitive. He's up there near the front, but he's just not standing out and doing the little things that really put you over, like what Gasly did, or what like even Alonso did. Not that Alonso has to prove to anybody, but he's just not pulling anything out of the hat that's like, holy cow, where'd that come from, Carlos? That was magic. No magic moments, just really good driving.
But if it doesn't work at Ferrari, I think Aston Martin should put him in Lance's seat.
Yeah.
And have the Spanish Armada over there. Right?
That would be, he would be the perfect fit over there.
He would be the perfect fit
for
Alonso at Aston Martin.
Yeah. Till Alonso has to leave, but right now with Alonso doing Alonso stuff. So he would be he would be one formidable. Yeah, that would be a great pairing. It really
would be a great pairing.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's talk about Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton, P6, George Russell, the DNF. This is unfortunate because I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like Lewis and George both had a very fast car capable of a podium finish. Lewis got balked during qualifying. That made his work a bit harder for sure, while George started in third. Like some, Mercedes missed the call to box early on lap 1 or 2, and they left him out way too long for enters. And this moved them both backwards. It put Lewis at the back of the field at this point, right? And he was at the very back and on mediums to boot. And then you get George drifting down to midfield from his starting position. From there, Lewis mounted a very impressive recovery drive from P13 by passing the McLarens and others to get all the way back into the top 10. Now, for the rest of the race, Mercedes certainly got the strategy right. They got the calls right, and this left him fighting Carlos Sainz for 5th. But I honestly, Paul, I had Lewis down for a P2, P3, I think, in my fantasy picks on the podium, given what their pace looked like. And, I kind of felt like Lewis would have been there had Lewis been there and not missed that initial strategy call, I think he would have been right there with Alonso for P2, to be honest with you. And that, if you take Red Bull out of the equation for the balance of the season, that's the battle that's going on. Lewis versus Alonso in the Drivers' Championship. That's the battle, and I would have loved to see that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah. Missed the first one, fine. Missed the second one, shame on you. And I know they were calling, well, we're just gonna have to make this work. It's like that was never gonna work, right?
Never gonna work. And
so they had the pace, which is why you question why they threw the Hail Mary on that third lap on the dry tires.
Let me interject real quick.
Okay.
Because you might be thinking, okay, but it worked for Albon staying out on those slicks that long as the track dried out. It worked for him. It did. But my argument, Paul, tell me if I'm wrong here, but my argument would be that strategy would work for a Williams.
Right.
But it was not the strategy for a car as fast as Mercedes.
Right, because they had the pace, right?
They had the pace.
It's like you don't need to roll the dice and go through a Hail Mary,
Correct.
Kind of like where we're doing it at VIR, right? We're like, well, we have no pace. We just, through our strategy meetings, we're like, well, how can we do everything different than everyone else is doing and it still work out for us? And that's what you do when you don't quite have the pace. And admittedly, Albon, yes, he was up there, but there was no way it was going to match the Mercedes pace.
No, they were just looking for a top 10 finish.
Yeah, so you don't have to take chances. Lewis made a great jump at a great start and made up a lot of places of which he was trying to earn back, which he lost because of the qualifying thing. And then, just let the race roll and let Lewis work his way up and up and up. But when you do, roll the dice, it should be only when you're with the car that's kind of compromised on pace.
It's a bit odd. It's a bit missed call from Mercedes, and they had a much faster car than to gamble like that. They didn't need to gamble, and certainly not in the hands of Lewis, because, had they dove in when Max dove in on the second lap, they'd have been amongst the pigeons, and they'd have been fighting for P2, I think. So it was unfortunate. For George, he stayed out, and by virtue of everyone around him boxing, he briefly led the race. But by the time he did box, he sunk all the way down the grid. Now, in reaction to that, the team opted to put on hards on his first stop and try to go the distance. And it worked out for him to get all the way back up behind Lewis. So credit to the team. They were thinking long game. They weren't sure if it was going to rain again. I don't know. You could argue whether that was the right call or not. But regardless, it did work out to get him back up behind Lewis and to battle with Lando. But then ultimately, that ends up in a tire puncture for him late in the race. That battle with Lando is unfortunate. It's a shame because he retired the car at that point. But it's a shame because I honestly think Mercedes had serious pace here and could have factored in P2, P3 had they made the right call at the front. Or, maybe if it wasn't P2, P3, it was P3, P4. But still, I think Mercedes left a lot on the table. And I think Toto admitted as much.
Yeah, and I think so. I mean, just by what Russell was saying was we had me scheduled to be on the podium for this race. Is obviously they knew with confidence that they had the pace in the car anyway.
Yeah.
But it was a tough battle with Lando. Obviously they're buddies. I don't think there's any animosity there. But when you're fighting it out in that tight chicane and cars are moving around because it's wet weather, dry weather, patchy and everything, this stuff's going to happen when you're battling it out. And it just didn't work out for this. This time with George, I didn't really like his comments from inside the car about that stuff. I think George needs to get back to how he has been dictating it, and I'm thinking he's getting a little frustrated as he's falling further and further behind Lewis.
Yep.
So he's letting his emotions get a bit a hold of him. He needs to come back a little bit and go back to the George of calculating what he says and how he says it and the meaning and what he wants out of what he's doing.
I think it's frustration.
Yeah.
And as a driver, Paul, I know that I'm sure you've got friends on the grid that you're good friends with, but once the green flag goes, you got no friends.
Yeah, you got no friends. No. But there's battles and there's contact and then there's flat out taking somebody out and there's differences and the good drivers know what that is, right?
Right.
They know
And
if
then
they're
there's the
pushing
Paul
it a little bit.
Tracy's. Right.
And then there's Paul Tracy who had no idea what the hell just happened, but
Right.
he thinks he's the best driver ever. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Let's talk about McLaren. Lando Norris, P7, Oscar Piastri, and P9. Lando had a good start, but like others, he stayed out when the rain came, as did Oscar, and this left them falling back down the field like Mercedes did. Both Oscar and Lando were out of the points after their stops, but they managed to fight their way back into the points for a double points finish, which is really good. On one hand, it was a missed strategy call, but both cars in the points, that's a decent result. And Lando did have a good tussle with George there that, ended George's race. I tend to think, and I think Oscar had some really good moves during this race.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moves that didn't look rookie-ish, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Very seasoned moves from Oscar. But I kind of feel like at this point, and this is not derogatory in any fashion. It's not meant to be. But I think Lando is kind of a fire and forget weapon. And as long as you've got the laser on the target, he's going to strike. But if you deviate that and you miss the target a little bit, it's really hard for him to strike given the car's performance weaknesses, There's that limited window, I feel like, that Lando in this car, which has known weaknesses and lack of pace, but when he's starting qualifying in P2, if you miss that strategy slightly, the car isn't there to make up. But if you'd have nailed that strategy, there is a possibility he could have finished in that top 5,
Right.
or top 3.
I think the car was performing well. I think it was very racy, which Lando and certainly Oscar was showing off. And it's like, he's a rookie. Well, he's a very talented race car driver who's been driving for a very long time.
His whole life.
Right. And yes, it's his first year in Formula One, but right now he's got enough miles under him. He kind of knows what this car is capable of.
Yeah.
And then it's not necessarily being called, a rookie move versus whatever. It's like he's used to the car. He knows its boundaries. He's got enough racecraft in his all his past seasons from when he was probably 2.
Yeah.
That okay, I'm ready to do this now because I know I can achieve it with the car and I know what it's going to do. So I think mid-season he's there at one with the car. We saw it was a little bit of a struggle at the beginning, but now this is Oscar, right? And I think Oscar and Norris together is quite a fun pairing and very close in competitiveness. I know Lando probably doesn't like that so much.
Yeah, right.
But I know that Zach likes it very, very much.
Yeah.
And I think it's really helping move the team forward and keep the spirit up and just keep that team pushing because I think they're not very far off of Mercedes. And, that now who knows what Aston Martin are. But I think those 3 together, I know you were talking about Mercedes and Aston Martin and Alonso and Lewis, but I think these 2 are spoilers at any
they could
moment,
Yeah, they very well could be, because you do have a real tight battle for 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, going on, and I'm also kudos to the broadcast team because they really did focus on that 2nd through 10th, 13th sort of battles for most of the race, and I thought that was really good. No offense to Max, but when you're out leading and you're leading and there's no threat to passing, then you're going to go back and look at some of these battles that we saw the Gasly passes and Magnussen.
There's a lot of stuff to look at for sure.
There's a lot going on that track all over the place with all the rain and everything. And I thought the broadcast team did a pretty good job of covering that. Let's talk about Williams. Alex Albon, P8, Logan Sargent at D and F. Logan had a good weekend going, qualifying in Q3, but his race saw him crash into the barriers, and later it was revealed that it was a hydraulic leak at the curb when he went over the curb. At least that's what the team is saying, and that's what caused the crash, which, I'm glad to know it wasn't driver error in Logan's case, because it
did look weird.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of hit the curb and it just kind of kept going. So it was a power steering issue where the hydraulics failed, something like that.
Yeah, maybe. Because, everybody's flogging Logan right now, and I think it's hard to not have self-doubt when you're up against a guy like Alex who is
Yeah,
delivering in spades.
he's bringing it for sure.
Oh my gosh, he was my driver of the weekend, and while he stayed out initially on softs, and that dragged him backwards once the track dried out. Again, this is the right call for a team like Williams targeting a top 10 finish. So he went nearly 40 laps on the softs to claw his way back into the points. He was able to get the medium compounds to work for him, which a lot of the cars couldn't, and said that it was the best he's ever felt the Williams car since he's been driving for him, to claim eighth.
Wow.
in a very spirited and measured drive. I just think this young man is delivering, and we often talk about the shrewdness of Helmut Marko and the Red Bull driver. I think this is a miss. This is a miss for them. A total miss for Red Bull.
And it kind of felt like it at the time, didn't it?
It did.
Because he showed sparks even at Red Bull. I know it wasn't ultimately he was out there, pounding out in Verstappen's tracks, but if it wasn't for a couple of punts from other drivers, he would have been on the podium twice easy in his first debut, first few races.
You're absolutely right. You remember what the earmark for me of why Red Bull should have kept him at AlphaTauri is the times when he was ahead of Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing a great job of keeping Lewis behind and frustrating Lewis to the point Lewis punted him off twice, right? Physically. And so I thought, there's something to this kid. This guy is a good driver. And so anyway, not to step on your toes, but I think you're absolutely right.
No, right. And he's doing a formidable job. But the team is doing very well either, backed up by Sargent being in Q3.
Yes.
So whatever they're working on and however they're working together is quite impressive. Very. And Albert, Williams at this point are like, how do we hold on to this guy?
I know.
Right? Instead of, it seemed like when Albon moved to Williams, it was like saving Albon's career. Now Albon's saving Williams' team, right? And Val's obviously too. I mean,
James
I
is doing
had
a
full
great
faith
job
in that guy turning it around. But Formula One can be a so slow moving point of change because of how long development parts take and just the turn. Certainly, the job he had of turning around a team that was working at a very low budget and assets and things like that. But there's no doubt he's making a big impact too, and Albon's backing that up, and the whole team is making the most of everything they've got. You make a really good point on that, Paul, is that these kind of turnarounds do take time in Formula One. They don't happen overnight. If you think about Red Bull buying Jaguar, the Jaguar team who had enough losing, it took them, 7 years-ish? 7 years to deliver a winning team with Sebastian Vettel and 4 titles. Mercedes was Braun, was Honda, right? It took Mercedes. Braun won the championship, then it took Mercedes quite a while, 5 or 6 years to turn into a winning machine. So these turnarounds don't happen quickly in Formula One. I don't think we should miss just how quickly James Vowles has turned Williams' fortune around here. And Alex Albon. And I'm not taking away from the men and women who work at that team. They're working their tails off with great direction from James and a whole new, lease on life and a whole new look. To turn that team around from running at the back of the grid to being in the points is huge by Formula One terms. So don't miss that. And you don't want to marginalize that, because what James is doing and Alex and that whole team, the men and women at that team are doing right now is really impressive. It really is. Less impressive, Haas F1. Nico Hulkenberg in P12, Kevin Magnussen P16. Kevin looks set for a really good result. He got the strategy. The team nailed the strategy. Right on lap 1, boxed, put on the enters. It put him well into the points when he got back on track. And as the track began to dry, though, his pace did too. And he just drifted backwards. And then he got a black and white flag for blocking Albon, and he's also investigated for the restart infringement and got a 5-second penalty. It just started to snowball from there. And conversely, Nico stayed out too long at the beginning, struggled for pace to get into the top 10 and settling for P12. It's one of those deals, Paul, and I have to go back and look at the race because
After that first call, Kevin was thereabouts. I mean, he was in the top 10 and looked racy. And then once that track dried out, they both really struggled. So much so, then you've got Nico finishing ahead of Kevin. And yeah, not sure what caused it. I haven't read in depth the team's comments or Gunther's comments if once it dried out, if they were still struggling with that tire wear issue that they've been struggling with all season, if that degradation was super high, causing their pace. I don't know if it was by virtue of just merely getting stuck in a DRS train. I just haven't read enough, and apologies, I should have read that this morning. But yeah, tough race.
Yeah, it's tough to spend your free time trying to figure out what happened to Haas this week.
I know.
Last
Yeah,
week
right.
and the week before that.
I only have so much time. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of the head honcho, I know you've been asking for Gunther's head.
Well, that's a little harsh, but yeah.
but you know, it's something to contemplate, right? What is this team doing? Where are they going? I think Val's has shown you that you put the right person in place who can come around and change a team without necessarily changing the car, right? Change processes, change how they go racing, go about making the most of what they have. These kind of people are few and far between, but they are out there. And
maybe one of them is Alan Permain.
Maybe, but people like Seidel and Vowles, all these people that have good successes and know how to build a team and know how to find weaknesses and turn them into positives. But it's the structure of the team is weird because it's really about the friendship between Gunther and Haas, and then we're all in this together, and it's like if Gunther goes, does that mean Gene's out? Or is Gene in Formula One to be in Formula One, and Gunther is his man, or are they just in it as a partnership? And if they're not in it, then neither of them, they're all out. I don't know.
Otmar's available.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is, and he would be a good choice too. They need a change.
They do.
They need someone else to take a look at how they're doing things. Money isn't everything. It's a lot of things.
Yep.
But there's always a better way of doing things, and I think they've kind of stagnated and now they're going a bit backwards, and
I
they
agree.
don't seem to be able to solve those issues.
Yeah, it's not the drivers aren't the issue here. I think the point you made is absolutely spot on. It's the reason I'm saying that when a team's doing bad, you don't fire the whole team, you fire the coach. And I think at this point you've got to look at all the things you just said. Gene's long-term investment, is he an F1 for the long term, or is it just a friendship with him and Gunther, and they're doing it now because Formula One's popular and that kind of thing? I don't know the answers to those, and I don't have, it doesn't. I mean, if he decides he wants to sell and get out, I have nothing against that. I get it, but I think for the team's sake and for the men and women that work that team, they need a serious defining course correction, life-changing moment. Like getting rid of Capito and bringing in James Vowles, shaking things up. It may be what Alpine's trying to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
It depends on who they get. So Haas needs to do something like that. But anyway, I'm being harsh. And then finally, the last two teams, AlphaTauri, Liam Lawson P13, Yuki Tsunoda P15. Liam did a amazing job, a great job, and it was interesting because in the lead up to the race, Sky Sports had Damon Hill on, and Damon,
isn't he your birthday buddy?
He is my birthday buddy. He and I share a birthday. Yes, we do. Oh, I'm sorry, someone's calling me.
Would you like to get that?
No. I might. It was my daughter. You never know.
Yeah.
But Liam did a great job, and he, Damon said, well, at this point, he's got called up, no time to prepare. He just needs to sit. He needs to listen and learn from this weekend.
From Yuki.
And when he said that,
good God.
And when he said that, I'm thinking, no, Damon, that's not what he did. I suspect Liam didn't want to just sit and learn. He wanted to shine, and shine he did with the drive to P13 ahead of his teammate Yuki. Now, sure, He got a penalty for impeding in the pit lane, and I understand that, but that wasn't his fault. The team stacked the cars in a track that's very difficult to stack cars and have enough room. And I know Yuki had car issues, and it's also with George that begat a penalty. But despite all of that, he had a great weekend, Paul.
He did. It's so difficult. I mean, it wasn't just, he didn't even have a weekend. You know?
I
He had
know.
half a weekend. And the changeable conditions, I'm not sure, did he even get a dry session?
No, not until the race.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think he did a formidable job. I'm not saying he's the best. This is like a Schumacher-like beginning, but he was up against it. And it's not like the old days where he's been testing all year long, you know, bouncing out miles. And it's really just a matter of just insert driver here with a lot of experience.
Right.
They drive sims, which is one level, but not, you know. So it's, yeah, I think, you know, he made a little mistake, but he didn't make a lot of mistake. If I was him, I would have been okay, you know, if he was 10 seconds back of the last place person, and I would call that, but kept it on the road. But no, he got mixed up and started building up his repertoire past Leclerc. I know Leclerc had trouble,
Yeah.
but, you know, that cannot go unnoticed by that team. It's got to make
No.
them feel good about, you know, that system. They said he wasn't ready. Maybe he wasn't ready, you know, but when are you ready for Formula One? I'm not sure you ever are.
Right. Yeah, and I think I saw today that the team came out and said, yeah, well, Liam's going to be our guy until Daniel returns. You think?
Yeah. And now Ricardo's going, oh.
Yeah, right. Gosh, poor
They
Dan.
put me in, now they pull me back out.
Poor Dan.
Poor
what
Daniel,
a way to
yeah.
stall your comeback.
Mm-hmm.
So Yuki had a good race going. They left him out too long. He had that collision with George, garnered a penalty, dropped him backwards. He ends up in P15. Not a lot to talk about there for Yuki. Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas, P14, Joe Guan Yu, DNF. Joe stopped early like Sergio. This kept him well into the points. Very feisty when he was up there. Looked actually really good, I thought Joe did. As the track dried up, then his pace started to dry up too. Drifted a little bit backwards, but ultimately he aquaplaned off the track, hit the barriers pretty hard. And then the red flag came out.
Yep. Yeah, very tricky for him. I said, I think he could have got in top 10 if, you know, he kept it on the road, because he did make that big jump, and he could have took advantage of that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the Alfa Romeo teams, you know, I was talking about Seidel, who's at Alfa Romeo, but ultimately they're still not breaking themselves out into doing anything special this whole season, really.
Right. Let's see. Bodo stayed out like Albon, and then the track dried up. He did move up the field, unlike Alex. He didn't have the pace to make it pay dividends for him. He finished down in P12. Yeah. So there you go. All right, let's do some awards, shall we? First award of the podcast is always Move of the Race.
Stop yelling at Todd.
Yes, stop yelling at me. People.
Yeah, people.
It's kind of like, yeah, why didn't you do this and that? It's like, people, I've got a day job. You understand that? I can't help it. I would love to do this. If this was my job, I'd do it every single day, like a radio show with call-in people and all kinds of stuff. But it's not. Who'd you have move of the race?
I got Alonso at turn 3, but it's not just Alonso. You know, there was a lot of good moves out there, and you know, I talked about the track layout and how that was working, different surfaces with different grip levels, and I think Alonso's brain was just ahead of everybody else at that moment in time, right? But we saw it in the rain coming out of 3 that if you kept it tight on the exit, you may have lost a little in the entry. But the exit had so much traction offline, which normally happens in the rain. You get a little offline, you gain a little grip there because it's not so polished. And Alonso made the most of it, as did some other drivers, and made the move on the outside down to the chicane. So I thought overall that was just fun to see all those moves in the race, but Alonso kind of typified and to perfection what a good move really was.
Yeah, I had Gasly on Sainz because that was the podium.
Yeah.
That was it. And it was a great move.
Yeah, that was the outside move at 1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a couple of good ones there too. We tried it once. Second time, nailed it.
Yeah, it was really good. I liked it. Yeah. Next award, Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
Oh, boy. Paul, who'd you have?
Well, I hate picking your guys. And although I don't know if I was bigging him up or was I not bigging him up, but I'm picking Leclerc and Ferrari combination there. Obviously, the tire situation on pit lane was a debacle, but it just went from insult to injury for him and Ferrari through that whole race.
Yeah. I've been picking on my team for the last several podcasts, donkey the word, so I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to give it to Mercedes. I think Lewis and George had a very fast car this weekend. I think that missed strategy call at the beginning really killed them, and I wouldn't expect that from Mercedes. So that was a bit surprising for me. I think Lewis was on it, and I think he was there and could have been. I think George look good too, so I give Mercedes. All right, final word of the podcast is drive of the race.
Down.
It's in there, Lewis.
All right, Paul, drive of the race. Who is it?
Get in there, Liam, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I'm picking
good.
that guy.
That's a good shout, Paul.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
I can't even tell people how difficult that would actually be. And to perform like that, not just finish the race, but perform like that, I think was terrific. Terrific to watch. Enjoyed it.
I do too. I'm giving it to Pierre. I think he needed it. I think the team needed it. And I think he drove a brilliant race up to P3. So I give it to Pierre. If I had to pick someone else, I'd probably pick Lewis. I think Lewis had a good race too. But I think Pierre put it all together, and especially in an Alpine. That's a good performance. So there you go. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. That's what we think about the race. Let us know what you think about the race. You can do that. Go to theparcferme.com. Share your opinion with decorum and civility. As always, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters, because we could not and would not do that. I sounded like Karoon there, didn't I? We could not do that, would not do that without you. So thank you so much for the support. If you like this podcast, go to your favorite podcast player, give us a good review, give us some love over there. We'd appreciate it. Reach out to us on Facebook, the Parc Fermé fan group page, or the Parc Fermé on Facebook. You can do it on Twitter at Paul F1B. You can get me at _Camber_ or at the Parc Fermé. Over on TikTok, you can find us at the Parc Fermé. On the gram, you can find us.
You can't find me on TikTok. I'm sorry.
Oh, Paul's not on TikTok. You can find me on TikTok. Yes, you can. So anyway, we'd love to hear from you. And thanks for all of you that reach out and chat with us. I always appreciate that. So anyway, thank you so much, Paul. Great to have you back. I know you are off into Goodwood next week. That's going to be exciting.
Yes, heading back to England, and then going to do a couple of days in Wales. I'm going to go up Mount Snowdon.
Yep.
And then hit Goodwood Revival, which I'm super excited about.
That's awesome. Take lots of pictures.
Always wanted to go there, and we're off.
Yes. All right. Yes. Take pictures. And then next week also, I will be in Belgium next week.
What?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, next week there won't be an Italian Grand Prix review unless I can con Paul from doing a makeup review sometime down the line. But I do have a brand new Parc Fermé Stories podcast that I will post on Monday for you. I hope you enjoy that. They're a lot of fun to do, and I really enjoy doing them for you, and I hope you guys like that. So next week, look for a Parc Fermé Stories in your podcast feed and not a race review. But we will be back that following week. And until that time, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.